Our next speaker is Bonnie Tompkins. Now, Bonnie is from Canada and she's the Compassionate Communities National Lead. And she's going to talk to us about how to develop a compassionate community. In your forum satchel, there is a PDF that she has developed for you all, and she's going to be sharing it on the screen, but it's also available for you to take home and in your satchel. But Bonnie's work mobilises compassionate communities across Canada and focuses on the community and their role in those experiencing serious illness, caregiving, grieving and dying. Bonnie has led community-level initiatives across Canada and is an active contributor to Compassionate Communities' work internationally. She is a council member of the Public Health Palliative Care International Association and coordinator of Cancer and Work Canada. Her interest in palliative care developed through personal experience as a caregiver to her late partner who died while completing her public health degree. So welcome, Bonnie.
All right, I'm just gonna share my screen with you. Can everybody see my screen? I'm hoping so. Great, well, thank you for inviting me to participate in this, which looks like a very packed event today. I'm very excited to be here and just talk about how to develop a compassionate community based on my variety of experience and learnings during this time in the area. Just to quickly go through what we'll cover today. So we're going to focus on why, focus on the developing a compassionate community versus starting up. What a social innovation is. We're going to talk a little bit about social innovation to just sort of help us understand social innovation, its stages and barriers. And then what else we can do to ensure the survival of our compassionate community initiative. Then we're going to focus in on 3 best practices that you need to think about today to look at engaging in your initiative so that, again, you can ensure its survival. Give you a couple of key things to remember while you're working on your initiative and having those engagements in the community, and then going to share a lot of supportive resources with you that you guys can access that are free and available. So why focus on developing a compassionate community? So for myself, and I've been in the field since 2015, and quite often, I see people really focus on how to get the compassionate community started, which is great because that means, you're going to be starting those conversations, and obviously that's the key. But I feel like we maybe need to think a bit bigger as well from the start. Often these people are asking me again and again, how do I start one, Bonnie? How do I start one? And this is often even after they have had those community meetings and the community has expressed, yes, we want to move forward with doing this. So why is this happening? And really, I think it's because during that startup stage, when you're having those conversations in the community, the people who are driving that change, so those change agents, they need to also be thinking forward as well. So they need to think about the future, and they actually need to look at starting to do some of that planning now for the future of their initiative. It's a bit, I think, counterintuitive, but it appears that it is crucial. So really, what I want you to remember is that when starting a compassionate community initiative, you also have to think about the future and plan for it at the same time. And this PowerPoint is going to help you do that. So let's get into social innovation. But again, we want to talk about social innovation just so everybody really understands what this is and the stages. So social innovation really is about either a new idea or reimagining a way of addressing an issue or a concern, and ultimately, creating change for the better in the world. Social innovation is usually done through 3 streams. So there's policy, there's culture change, and then there's in markets, so money. compassionate communities itself is an example of a culture change, certainly because one of the common outcomes that most compassionate communities want to achieve is actually to create a change in culture in the community. So the stages of development. So there are 4 stages of development that's important for you to understand within social innovation. So that's how your initiative will evolve over time. So there's ideation, which is basically the change agent going out there, exploring, talking about the idea, seeing, is there an issue? Is there a concern? And how do we address it, right? If anybody's ever seen me speak, they'll hear me say, this is where you're going out and you're planting the seed. Then there's invention. So that's where, okay, you have community buy-in. They're interested in moving forward. And now is when the work begins, so that you're co-creating with the community to see, okay, how are we going to achieve the goal that we want to achieve, right? So what actions are we going to put in place? Then you move through to adoption. And so adoption itself, this is where you may have a great program, you may have a great initiative. It can be simple or it can be quite complicated. But if you have something that's strong and you're seeing success and you're getting positive feedback, you maybe want to look then at scaling and spreading this, right? So that may mean scaling and spreading within the community. It also could potentially look at scaling and spreading to other communities. And just a little example of this, when I worked on the ground, we did an initiative with one of our local library system where we had basically 3 books in a bag, and the local funeral home funded it. So they bought the books in the bag. They sponsored it, so they had their logo on the bag. And it was such a good success that the other surrounding communities, their library system said, can we get involved in this? Could we maybe have a couple of sets of books that then start circulating throughout these 4 different library systems? And so ultimately that's what ended up happening, the evolution of the program, and it's still going today, even through this very digital age. And then the last piece, or the last stage, is obviously the impact. And that's where you start to see a change in culture in your community, and hopefully for the better. So what are the common barriers and their impacts during social innovation, right? So it was really interesting to learn this, that many social innovations actually, they never make it. They die before the adoption stage. It's a really, really high rate. And what literature has said is that these initiatives often fall prey to common barriers, and then basically they just simply die off. And so the key here is to move from ideation through invention to adoption. That's the crucial window. And in fact, it's known as the valley of death within social innovation and business innovation. That is where the most innovations die. So the key here is, what are these barriers and how can we get through? So the common barriers that were noted, both in social innovation and business, was leadership issues. So sometimes it can simply be a case of it's one person who's driving that it's a culture change agent. And, sometimes maybe they're really passionate about the work, they're having a hard time maybe handing it over. And so things come up, life comes up. And so all of a sudden they maybe have to take a step back, and there's no one who can easily come into play. So that's sort of one of the common leadership barriers. Planning is a huge thing, and we will talk about that a bit more today. But much like I said at the beginning, while you're doing your startup, you've got to be thinking about the future, right? And that's the planning piece. And then feedback. Interestingly enough, often, even in business and our work in social innovation, we pilot things, right? And we want to get feedback from the community or the target audience. How are things working? And did you like what the program did, or what have you? But interestingly enough, often that feedback isn't integrated. What happens is whoever's driving that change, they feel that they know the product already, or they know the program and they're happy with the way it is, and they don't integrate that change, and then they roll it out and it doesn't have the success that it could have had with if they had just integrated that change. So then we wanted to look at how can we ensure the survival of these COMCOM initiatives? So clearly, based on the rate that social innovation dies, we clearly had to be able to figure out, well, how can we help these initiatives survive, right? And so we looked at public health research and what were those best practices, let's say, that strong, sustainable community initiatives had in place that were allowing them to be around on the long haul. And so we saw things like leadership again, and I know Jesse, I know that was one of the learnings in the work with the Groundswell Project was leadership, community engagement, authentic community engagement, doing some strategic planning, partnerships, having lots of diverse partnerships, paying attention to the language you use, right? Making sure you're planning for assessing trust, right? Making sure you're really building that trust. And then as well, measurement, evaluation. So having that evaluation measurement plan in place. So then what we did is we looked at, okay, well, what are those top best practices that we need to make sure COMCOMs get in place right away? And so our research found that leadership, language, and community engagement, these are the best practices that initiatives need to look at engaging with as soon as possible. And this comes from, we did a lot of focus groups with subject matter experts in the field around community engagement and social innovation, as well as compassionate communities across the world. And we were hearing the same consistent message. So out of the 8 you just saw on the previous slide, we're prioritizing these 3. So the other 5 are equally as important, but what we have found is that you'll engage with them when you need them. So you don't have to get them into place right away. You may engage with them, one of them 6 months down the road, could be a year down the road. So what I want to do is just take a few minutes to look at those 3 top best practices and just explore them a little bit with you. So looking at leadership. So what can we do to strengthen our leadership within our initiative? So there's a few key things here. Engage several people to participate in a leadership group of some sort right away. I mean, as soon as possible, because burnout is high, because it's a lot of work to get a compassionate community off the ground. And so right away, for the survival of your initiative, get a couple other people at least involved to have an active role. So more than one person knows the inner workings, basically. Decide what the structure of that leadership team will be. And just remember, it doesn't have to be formal and it doesn't have to be informal. You decide what works for you, right? But get something in place so everybody understands, some basic structure there. Have a variety of backgrounds and experiences in the leadership team. This is where it's really important to make sure that, you're not grabbing all from the same sort of group of people, right? Really go after a diverse leadership team. They're going to bring a lot of unique experience and knowledge to the table. And that you need to plan for change for leadership, right? So again, right out of the gate, I've certainly been talking about burnout, life happens, we have to step back. So start planning right away. Don't wait until that moment comes where someone has to step back because they need to caregive for a partner or what have you, right? So start that planning for change. Language. So looking at language. So here, what is important for us to understand about language, again, for the strength of our initiative. And that really is that you must adjust your language for the different audiences. It is crucial. If you're not adjusting your message, the audience just may not understand your message, right? And that's kind of crucial in those early days. So how do you adjust your language? Really, it's about understanding who that audience is that you're presenting to, or you're sharing that communication with. And I will say, I was sort of well known for, when I was on the ground, I would actually Google every single person that I knew was going to be, at a town hall or something like that. So I really, really knew my audience. Decide on what the purpose of that communication is. So are you trying to inspire someone? Are you trying to get them to say yes? So what are you trying to do, right? How formal should that language be? So again, this is a product of understanding who's in the audience. So if you're speaking to a bunch of healthcare professionals, you need to think about how formal that language needs to be versus maybe being in a faith setting or having a community town hall. And then again, what is the feeling you want to leave the audience with, right? So do you want them to feel joyful, hopeful, optimistic, right? So those subtle little tones, it's great if when you're adjusting your language, you can weave those in. And so again, the key here really is understand your audience, adjust the language. I've heard it again and again around the world as being one of the big pieces people really need to understand. You can't just keep submitting the same document to different audiences. Community engagement. So of course, community engagement is a large piece. So what do we need to think about to strengthen our initiatives engagement with the community? And public health palliative care certainly has community engagement, authentic, community-driven engagement as one of their, principles for compassionate communities work. So you got to decide, like, how engaged do we want the community to be? And there is a really great diagram floating around. You may have seen it before, and it's public participation. And so how engaged do you want them to be? Do you just want to inform them? Do you want to consult them, involve them, collaborate, or empower? Empower means they are running the show and you're supporting them. And the reality is, pick your goal. You may not start there, but what you need to do is you need to kind of keep assessing things to understand, am I there? Are we close? And even still, some of your programs may be on the spectrum, right? So you don't have to be at Empower all the time. Dedicate time to creating and managing your community engagement plan. It really, for the success, it will make a big deal or a large impact. So really, you've got to be doing some planning. You've got to do a bit of assessing. How are things going? Are we getting in front of the audiences we want to get in front? And then, and really, participating in authentic community engagement, it is not easy. It takes time and work, but I promise you the benefits will outweigh that workload. So just a couple of key things to remember. So share your idea with anyone who will listen, especially in the beginning. Just plant that seed, Everybody may not be receptive at first, but that's fine. You've planted that seed. I say let it percolate, and often they come back. Engage a leadership team as soon as possible. So I think we've really sort of talked about that. You got to share the load. Adjust your language to make sure your message is being received and that you get that support that you're looking for. Understand the stages of development so that you understand, okay, here are the stages, here are the common barriers, where are we at? Are we coming up to a tough time? So make sure you understand that and you pay attention to where you are. Plan for community engagement from the start. So create that community driven initiative. Also, it builds trust. It builds trust internally with the leadership team. It also builds trust within the community. Explore funding from the start. Probably a counterintuitive sort of thought, but the thing is, in business, this is what they do. Business innovation, they go after the money right away because everybody's excited. Everybody's energized about this potential product. So the same thing, the same advice is being given in social innovation. Seize funding right away. Invite funders to your town halls right from the get-go. And then remember that culture change takes time, right? And so we need to create our initiatives to be sustainable so that they can survive over that long time. And so we've got to think, what are the best practices for community development, like for instance, asset-based community development. And then what are those best practices to sort of create that structure internally, right? And that's where you look at leadership, you plan for community engagement, strategic planning, funding, partnerships, measurement, language, and then paying attention again to building trust. So that's been probably a lot of information. So what I wanted to do is share some resources with you again that are free. You can Google them and find them. So there's several startup toolkits that exist now, which is really great. And they're all quite different and unique. So Pallium has one called the Compassion Community Startup Toolkit. The Groundswell Project has their published paper. The BC Centre of Palliative Care has a Compassionate Communities Toolkit, which also includes an index. That's really quite useful. Good Life, Good Death, and Good Grief, they also have a toolkit on their website if you just look for that toolkit tab. And then looking at how do we get through invention and make it to impact. And so this is Pallium Canada's newest resource that certainly I've been excited to be engaged with and co-creating with several people. And so the Compassionate Community Sustainability Guide, you guys can access it on our website. This guide has all those 8 best practices, talks about what you need to think about, what you need to be doing, and then it also provides you with tools to help you implement those best practices. So we really wanted to give you that knowledge, but then also help you plan for it. So this will include tools for planning. And then the last piece, just quickly, I think everybody received this 2-pager in their sort of little welcome package today. So have a look at it. It covers a lot of the content that was in this presentation today. And I just wanted to draw your attention to the back side. So what I've tried to do here is I've taken those stages of development, and what I've done is taken those best practices and sort of talked about them from what the leadership team is thinking about at those different stages in relation to community engagement, building trust, and then what is happening out in the community. So what is the community seeing, or what is the community engaging in? So really look at this, move along, and see how we talk about the different best practices as we move along towards impact. Any questions? Certainly, I will encourage you to check out Pallium's website, stay up to date. We have a lot of new resources coming out in the next couple of months. If you have any questions, feel free to email me or follow me on Twitter.
Thanks so much, Bonnie. Is Bonnie still there? No? Yes?
I'm here, yep.
We just want to acknowledge Bonnie because it's quite late over in Canada. So thank you for taking the time to join us today. Really valuable information.
Thank you. I'm a passionate one. No problem for being here.